Hello everyone, and thanks for clicking on this video. Today I'm going to show you how to create this super cute thumbnail using Photoshop and Illustrator. You can definitely create thumbnails like these in free programs as well, but this is just what I personally use, and I figured if you're a complete beginner, you can use this tutorial to make your very first thumbnail. Besides that, let's get right into the video. So as you can see, I just have my desktop, and the first thing I'm going to do is open Photoshop, and you want to click on new file. And let's say you don't have like any custom options right now. What you want is for your width to be 1920 and your height to be 1080. That's the standard size of any thumbnail or any screen really. And that your orientation is widthwise if you're doing this for YouTube. If it's for something like Instagram Reels, you can make it lengthwise. The resolution doesn't matter so much. I just have it at 300, but you can make it lower or higher. Typically, resolutions don't need to be so high anyway because thumbnails are super small. Then make sure it's RGB because this is digital, and you can keep your background white. And then just create. So now that you have your canvas, the first thing you want to do is copy and paste your image into Photoshop. This is going to be like the main image, maybe like a picture of your face or something like that. So I went ahead and took a video of myself, and I'm going to just screenshot a certain point in the video to use. This is kind of embarrassing. I pretty much do this for every video. I'm gonna pick like one where I'm pointing. So maybe this one. And if you don't know how to screenshot on a Mac, you can just hold Command-Shift-4 and that'll give you these little crosshairs, and then just go ahead and select the entire image. If you don't want a screenshot, you can also just right click and copy, and that's another way to do this as well. And then if you went with the latter option and copied, you can just click Command V, click OK, and it'll paste the image. And I'm just gonna go ahead and make this smaller so that it fits on the screen. The way that I transform this image to make it smaller is by hitting Command T, and so that's what makes this transformable. If I hold Shift and transform, that's going to move it around, but if I don't hold Shift, it's going to stay in place. So I'm just gonna go ahead and rotate it in the orientation that I want and make it just fit my canvas. That's good. So now that we have our image here, we can start editing. The first thing I like to do is actually to isolate myself so that I can add other images behind me, but still have my face in the front. So you can do that by clicking the quick selection tool. If you don't know where that is, you can hold select. You might have like a magic wand or object selection tool option. For this, we're gonna use the quick selection tool. You can also just hit W and that'll show you the selection tool. And I like to have it set on this option, and I'll explain why in a second. But the nice thing about the selection tool is that you have this little circle. I'm gonna make my radius a little bigger so you can see better. But you have this circle which shows what you're selecting, and if you just hold and drag, it'll automatically select what you're dragging over. And it's okay if it's not perfect right now because we can fix it later. So I've just about selected my body, but of course it got some of my bed and my door too. And so that's why I like to have it set on this negative, because then I can just go ahead and zoom in and just click, and it'll just get rid of the subjects that I'm clicking on that I want to remove. So I'm just cleaning up, and as you can see, it accidentally removed by hand. So for it to add it again, you have to hold Shift, and as you can see, when I hold Shift, it turns into a plus sign and not the negative sign. And so that means you're adding to the selection and not taking away from it. So I'm just going to reselect my finger and just further clean up. Let's say I accidentally selected my hand again and I'm like, oop, I don't want to do that. You can also just hit Command Z, and that is just the shortcut for undo. So I'm just going to continue cleaning up the selection. It's okay if it's not absolutely perfect. For example, I'm not going to go into the little sections of my hair and select them. You can do that if you want to. I just don't think it's super necessary. Also because it's not like my image is super high quality anyway. And that's pretty much it. The dotted line shows you exactly where you have selected, and I'd say I'm pretty happy with this selection now. Now that we have the selection, I'm just going to hit Command C and then Command Shift V. Command Shift V means you are pasting in place, so that means the image is exactly where you want it to be and not a few pixels off. Now if you go to our layers panel, you see that we have me cut out and the original image. I like to keep the original image in the back, and you're going to see why later as well. Now that we've done that, we can start going into Google and copying and pasting other assets in here. So I have Google open, and I already know that I want to add a Photoshop and Illustrator icon, so I'm going to add those. Let's look up a Photoshop icon. Try and get icons that are transparent in the background. That means the background doesn't have like a white border or something like that, and you can tell when it has this little checkered background. That means that it's going to be transparent. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy the Photoshop image and go back to Photoshop and hit Command V, click OK, and now that's pasted. And again, I'm just hitting Command T so I can move this around. You can also just use this option and that'll let you move your layers around too. And then I'm going to go back and find an Illustrator icon. Again, just copy the image, go back, Command V, OK, Command T so I can resize it and move it. And let's say I don't want these icons to be covering my fingers. I can just go to the layers panel and select both of them. You can select two things by holding Shift and then drag them underneath the image. And as you can see, now my finger is not hidden. I didn't do a great job of doing the selection in the beginning, but it's okay, it's not too bad. So I'm gonna click on my Photoshop layer and actually just further resize it and maybe change the orientation, and I'm gonna do the same with Illustrator. Perfect. So let's say I want to modify these images so that they have a white border. There's a really easy way to do that. First, click on the layer that you want to modify. So for me, it's this Illustrator panel. I'm going to go back to the quick selection tool that we used before, and I'm just going to go ahead and sloppily kind of go over the entire image. Photoshop will automatically just add a perfect selection around your image because, as we said, it's a transparent image and there's nothing in the background. Next, we're going to go to Select and then Modify and Expand. This is essentially going to take our selection and make it bigger by a few pixels. I like to use 12, but you can play around with this and then you can just hit OK. And as you can see, the selection is perfectly expanded by exactly 12 pixels all the way around. Then I go underneath my Illustrator layer and create a new layer. Choose the Paint Bucket tool, or you can hit G as the shortcut for it. Go and select white in your colors panel and then just click on the selection. And then I'm going to hit Command D to deselect. And I just made a super cute white outline for my Illustrator icon. I'm going to do the same thing again with Photoshop. I'm also going to go ahead and merge these. You can do that by hitting Shift and selecting the two icons that you want to merge. Right click and click Merge Layers, or Command E for the shortcut. And I'm going to do the same with the Photoshop icon. Now that we have our icons and everything merged, let's say I want to spice these up even more by creating drop shadows. So I have my Illustrator icon selected, and then you're going to go to Layer, Layer Style, and click Drop Shadow. And as you can see, it automatically creates one for you, but you can play around with the metrics over here. The nice thing is that it also shows you a preview of what it looks like. I personally like to have my distance set at 0, which means that the shadow is coming from the very middle, kind of a large spread, maybe at around 22, and the size of maybe like 65. And I'm just gonna hit OK. And the nice thing is once you do that once, you can just go ahead and select your Photoshop option, select layer, go to layer styles, drop shadow, and it'll use the same exact settings that you had just previously used, and then just click OK. If you want to edit these at any point, you can see them in your layer panel, and you can just double click on drop shadow and that will let you re-edit it if you're not happy with it. And there we go. I think that looks pretty good. And now I think we can move on to Illustrator. Before doing that, I'm going to go ahead and group everything. So again, I'm just going to select the very bottom layer, hold Shift, and select the top layer and group them together. And then I'm going to hit Command C and Command V to duplicate the group. And then I'm going to right click on the group and merge the group together. Then I'm going to hit the selection symbol. I'm going to use the rectangle one, and I'm going to select the whole thing and hit Command C. This way we've just copied our Photoshop image and prepared it so that we can paste it into Illustrator. Now I'm going to open Illustrator, or maybe you already have Illustrator open, and I'm going to create a new file. And as you can see again, I have a preset for web, but again, just make sure it's 1920 by 1080 pixels, and I'm going to hit create. So Illustrator is a little different. Illustrator is a vector program. Photoshop is a raster program. If you don't know, raster means it's images and assets in individual pixels, whereas vectors are images and assets created using equations and math. So no matter how many times you resize your image, it's always going to be perfect. As you remember, we just copied our image from Photoshop, and now that we're in Illustrator, you're just going to hit Command V and you've just pasted it. Don't worry that it looks so small. We're going to resize it, and the quality isn't going to be too bad. Adobe is really dumb where their shortcuts aren't consistent in every app. So as you can see, when I resize this image and I'm not holding Shift, I am able to resize it freeform. Whereas in Photoshop, where you do hold Shift, that's where you resize it freeform. So that's kind of confusing. So when you're in Illustrator, just make sure that when you're resizing, you hold Shift so that it's locked in place. So I've just resized my image to my artboard, and now I'm gonna add little elements such as little stars and some text. So the first thing I'm gonna add is text. So I'm gonna go ahead to the type tool and just click, and the automatic thing it'll say is usually lorem ipsum. And I'm going to go ahead and change the font. You can do that in the properties panel over to the right. And I'm gonna use the font Futura. I know that that's a really popular font that a lot of YouTubers like to use. If you don't know, it's actually the same font as the Nike logo. It's a super popular font that a lot of graphic designers use. But I like to use Futura Bold since this is a title. And I'm gonna call this thumbnail tutorial. Now that we've done our text, I want to change the color and also resize it. The way you can change the color or the fill of your text is by going to this square over here and double clicking it, and that over there is your fill, and you can change the color of the text to whatever you want. I like to usually do white, and then if you want, you can also add a stroke. A stroke is this hollow square over here, and as you can see, when I double click it, I can add a stroke to my image, but I typically don't like using strokes for text personally. And then I'm just gonna go ahead and resize this so it's a little bigger. And I want to add a drop shadow to this text as well so that it's easier to read, because against my shirt and the background, it's kind of hard to read. So similarly to how we added a drop shadow in Photoshop, it's actually the same thing in Illustrator. Here in Illustrator, you're gonna go to Effect, Stylize, and Drop Shadow. I'm going to create the offset in both of these to be 0 so that the shadow is coming from the center. And then I'm going to increase the blur a little and lower the opacity. Opacity means how transparent something is. So I'm just going to play around with these settings. I'd say I'm pretty happy with that. And then I'm just going to go ahead and click OK. So I have my text. Let's say I want to warp this text a little bit, maybe give it a little arc or something. So I'm going to make sure my text is selected. I'm going to go to Effect, Warp, and Arc. As you can see, it automatically gives you an arc, but you can adjust it over here. I want the arc to be on the bottom end and not the top end. So I'm gonna make it around 21. And then with this, I can play around with if the arc is gonna be skinny on one side or thick on one side, change the vertical or horizontal of it. But I like to just keep them at 0 for this. But yeah, I'd say I'm pretty happy with that. As you can see, you can select arc and click a bunch of different options. You can have it look like that. You can have it like a shell. You can choose a lot of different options, but I like the default arc option personally. And then I'm just gonna go ahead and click OK. I'm gonna go ahead and resize the text, make it a little bigger so that it's easier to read. You should keep in mind that when people see your thumbnails, they're seeing them in a really small scale, so make sure that they're readable. I'd say now I'm pretty happy with the text, and now I just want to add a few cute little icons to my image. The first thing I like to add is usually a star, and this is a really easy way to make stars in Illustrator. You're gonna go to your shape icon over here, hold and click the ellipse tool. Then you're gonna hold shift and drag to make a circle. Again, we're holding shift because if we don't hold shift, it's going to make a non-perfect ellipse. Then I'm going to select my circle, click Effect, Distort and Transform, Pucker and Bloat. And then as you can see, when I go towards pucker, it makes a cute little twinkle. And the opposite, when you go to bloat, it makes this interesting, I guess, flower shape. I think that looks cute too. But for now, I just want a cute little star. So I'm gonna go to pucker, and I like to go maybe around like 75 and just click OK. Now I can go ahead and transform this, make it a little smaller and just move it around. I'm also going to copy and paste it. If you want to see your elements in Illustrator, you can see them in the layers panel, much like Photoshop. But yeah, I'm just going to go ahead and Command C and Command V to just create a few more cute little twinkles. Okay, now that I'm happy with the twinkles, I'm going to add a few flowers. There's a really easy way to do this as well, again using the ellipse tool. By the way, I'm zooming in and out by using my fingers on my trackpad. But anyway, I'm going to zoom in and I'm going to make a ellipse. This time I'm not holding shift. And now that I have my ellipse selected, I'm going to go to Object, Repeat, Radial. And you can see that that makes a little flower. You can adjust the settings of the radial repeat by dragging these elements. So maybe putting them closer to the center, adjusting how many repeats there are, and that makes just a cute little flower. Now that I have my cute flower, I just resized it, and then again, I'm just going to copy and paste to put it in areas where I think it would look nice. Again, copy, paste, and just moving it. I'd say I'm pretty happy with this thumbnail. I think everything looks really cute, but I think we can make a few tweaks. For example, I want to make sure this text is right in the middle, so I'm going to go to the Properties panel and go to Align and click this, which will make sure it's right in the middle. And I think I'm just going to click on some of these and rotate them so that they're a little offset. I also think I might make the image itself a little bigger so that it takes up a little more space. You may notice that when I make the image bigger, you can see the border of the artboard here. If you want to see what your thumbnail is going to look like exactly, you can go to View and hit Trim View, and then that'll trim anything that's excess around the canvas. And there you go. I'd say I'm pretty happy with this thumbnail, and I'm ready to export. To export an image in Illustrator, you just have to go to File, Export, and Export for Screens. And as you can see, I have my artboard selected. Make sure to rename it. So I'm gonna name it Tutorial Thumbnail, and go ahead and select where you want to save it. So I have my Documents panel and my Mila Makes folder selected. And down here in the Formats panel, I like to save it as a PNG 8. That essentially reduces the quality because a lot of apps, including YouTube, have a gigabyte limit on how big your thumbnail can be. So I like to save it as a lower quality so that it doesn't take up too much space and YouTube accepts my thumbnail. Now that I'm happy with everything, you can just go ahead and click Export Artboard. Now I can just click on the image in wherever it was saved in my file, and there it is in all its glory, and you can upload it to wherever you want, whether that's YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, whatever. And that's pretty much it. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial and that it was helpful. Let me know if you'd like to see more Photoshop or Illustrator tutorials from me. I use them a lot for work and I use them a lot as a student, so I know my way around these programs and would love to answer any questions you guys might have. Otherwise, that's pretty much it. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. It really helps me out and the channel out. We just reached 700 subscribers, so thank you so much for that, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!